Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, The Countdown is On, a Procrastinator's Guide to Giving Tuesday. We are thrilled to have you here and to chat with you about how you can make the most of the next few weeks until Giving Tuesday. So we're just going to wait another minute or so to get started so we can allow everybody to get logged on. So just hold tight and we'll be back with you in just a minute. Again, welcome to The Countdown is On, a Procrastinator's Guide to Giving Tuesday, presented by Network for Good. We would like to thank Network for Good for making today's webinar presentation possible. With only 20 days until the world's biggest day of giving, there is still time for your organization to create and execute an engagement plan. Today, we're going to give you a crash course in executing a Giving Tuesday campaign on a tight timeline. So before we get started, we have just a couple of logistical notes that I want to make. First is that we really want this to be an interactive webinar, so be sure to ask all of your questions to our speakers by typing them into the questions box on the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be addressing as many questions as possible in the Q&A portion of the presentation, which is at the end, but please don't wait until then to submit your questions. Feel free to submit them as they come to you throughout the presentation. And to answer everybody's first question, yes, we are recording this presentation and we'll make it available along with the presentation deck to you via email in the next day or so. So don't worry if you don't catch everything that our speakers say today. You will be able to review the content as much as you like. And now that the logistics are out of the way, I'm excited to get started. So my name is Arielle Gart, GuideStar's Marketing and Outreach Manager, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. In my role at GuideStar, I implement many of our externally facing marketing initiatives, including managing our social media channels, webinars, and online fundraising, because just like you, GuideStar is a nonprofit 501c3. So I'll be listening to a lot of what our speakers have to say as we're implementing our Giving Tuesday fundraising campaign as well. And presenting on today's webinar, we are thrilled to have Jamie McDonald, Giving Tuesday's Chief Strategy Officer. Jamie is a social sector entrepreneur and the founder of Generosity, Inc. She advises socially motivated business executives and visionaries driving large-scale change. Jamie works with the Belfer Center for Innovation and Social Impact at the 92nd Y as a part of the Giving Tuesday team, where she supports nearly 100 community leaders of local campaigns. We're also excited to have Daniel Morgan, the Chief Marketing Officer for Project Healing Waters Fly Fishing, Inc. Since 2011, Daniel has held the volunteer roles of Program Lead, Deputy Regional Coordinator, and was an early member of the CEO Advisory Council. He currently serves as the Chief Marketing and Strategic Communications Officer for Project Healing Waters Fly Fishing and continues to volunteer with the Syracuse, New York program. So we have a great webinar planned for you today, all about what you can do in the next 20 days to maximize engagement and fundraising on Giving Tuesday. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to kick everything off and get this presentation started. Jamie, take it away.
Thanks, Arielle. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you sound great.
Great. All right. So 3 weeks from today, we are going to celebrate the 7th Giving Tuesday. And just by virtue of the fact that you're on this webinar, you're probably deep in the planning. And today, as Arielle said, we're going to go through a series of steps that you can take that we have seen across thousands and thousands of campaigns make for a successful campaign on Giving Tuesday. But first, just a little bit more about me. So as Arielle said, I work on the Giving Tuesday team now, but I came to that role really starting from where you sit. So I am like you. In 2012, the first year of Giving Tuesday, I was really inspired by the vision of Giving Tuesday to reclaim the giving season on the heels of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And so jumped in as one of a small number of partners around the country who kind of heard of Giving Tuesday that first year. And in year 2, in 2013, I led the first large-scale Giving Tuesday campaign in the US, a campaign called the Be More Gives More campaign, where we brought our entire city of Baltimore together, my hometown, and set out with an ambitious goal to raise $5 million on Giving Tuesday 2013. And you got to remember, this is back when nobody knew what Giving Tuesday was, and to be the most generous city in America. Well, so we were pretty sure we were going to get the most generous city in America title because we weren't sure any other city was going to try to do a citywide Giving Tuesday campaign, but we knew that $5 million was a bit of a stretch. But as we started to spread the word about Giving Tuesday and what it was about, people from all over our community jumped on board, and we not only raised $5 million, we raised $5.7 million that day. Had hundreds of nonprofits, had lots of local business partners, had lots of people volunteering, and even had one woman who was on a fixed income and didn't have any dollars to contribute that day call us and ask if she could donate a grand piano that she had to a children's music organization. And we knew on the heels of that Be More Gives More campaign that Giving Tuesday was a powerful idea that really, really resonated with people. And part of the reason that it resonated is because it is Giving Tuesday, not Fundraising Tuesday. Now, I know a lot of you on the phone are here because what you hope will happen is that you'll inspire people to support you. And we hope that happens too. That is what we're about. We are about inspiring people to be generous. We view you guys in the nonprofit sector as our partners, but we view our customers, so to speak, as the individual givers all around the world who are looking not only to give generously, but to give together. And so as we think about Giving Tuesday, we really think about the deeper themes that resonate here and across the globe. Last year, Giving Tuesday had activity in 200 countries and territories around the world. It's the largest social movement in the world by scale of reach, and official country campaigns in almost 50 countries. So when you are participating from wherever you sit in Giving Tuesday, you are part of a global network of people who are all focused on how they can take this global movement and create local impact. They're celebrating the idea that we can give together. We're very clear at Giving Tuesday that it is not about money to us. It is about giving in all forms, time, skills, voice, and money. That our goal is really to spur creativity and collaborations because our sector needs more creativity and collaboration in order to continue to thrive. And we celebrate leaders from expected and unexpected places. In the photos that you can see here, you see campaigns from Canada, from Bethel, Alaska, from India, from, I think that's Azerbaijan, and from Barbados. And these are just a small number of the campaigns that we have around the world. So some of you, if you really are last minute folks and you're just getting geared up, you may need to do a little justifying of jumping in so late to important people in your organization, whether that's staff members, board members. So let me arm you with some facts. The first is that Giving Tuesday is now one of only 3 days a year where donors look for nonprofits to support. Think about that, as opposed to the other 362 days of the year when nonprofits are out there looking for donors. So because Giving Tuesday is now the biggest online giving day of the year in most places, it is like December 30th and December 31st, a day when the news cycle is so loud and exciting that donors are saying to themselves, I want to get in on the action today. Who can I support? So you want to be in that conversation with your donors. The next point is that Giving Tuesday is really reaching scale in the US. So we have partnerships with quite a few of the online giving platforms around the country, including our friends at Network for Good. And last year in the US alone, just online, more than $300 million was given on Giving Tuesday. And that represents just a small fraction of the giving in the US, because still online giving is a small fraction relative to offline giving, and obviously a tiny fraction of what was given around the world. And importantly, in the graphic here on the right, also provided by Network for Good, nonprofits that participate in Giving Tuesday, when Network for Good looked back at all the participants in Giving Tuesday from 2012 through 2016 versus those that just raised funds in December but didn't participate in Giving Tuesday, they found that those who participated in Giving Tuesday raised 14 times more than those who didn't participate. So the question we often get is it just taking away from year end? The answer is a definitive no. And while this is a Network for Good chart, we see this from our platform partners all across the country who do similar analyses. And in this next slide, it's a little hard to see. It'll be easier when you see the replay. But basically what we're showing here is this is the daily donations that happen on Giving Tuesday. That happen on every single day of the year in a research analytics partnership between Network for Good and the Chronicle of Philanthropy. And what you see is that Giving Tuesday is equal to December 31st in terms of number of donors, and it's the second biggest day of the year by dollars raised. And so that tells us a couple of important things. One is it tells us that smaller donors and younger donors are getting involved with giving on Giving Tuesday. And so again, another question we often get is, well, what's the value of getting a whole bunch of small gifts? Well, I'm a big believer in the power of small gifts. For one thing, you don't know if that small giver has greater capacity. You shouldn't assume by virtue of the size of their initial gift that they don't have the ability to give more. But perhaps more importantly is the point of this slide. Some of you probably recognize this guy down here on the bottom in color, Michael Bloomberg, the multi-billionaire founder of Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York. Well, right above him in that black and white picture is Michael Bloomberg the year he graduated from Johns Hopkins University. When he was solicited that year, he gave $5 to Johns Hopkins, the equivalent of about $32 today. Well, fast forward 40 some years, and Michael Bloomberg has now given $2.3 billion to Johns Hopkins. He single-handedly made the Johns Hopkins, the Bloomberg School of Public Health, the leading public health school in the world by virtue of his generosity. And the work that is done in that school is changing lives around the country and around the world. So I want you to think for a moment, as we're heading into the rest of the presentation, about how you treat your $32 donors. Do you celebrate them, thank them, call them, and appreciate their generosity? Or do you send them an email tax receipt and that's it? Because for far too many nonprofits, the latter is their approach to a donor that small. So just give that some thought as we're thinking about the value of the Giving Tuesday donors that are likely to respond to your campaign. Because more than the fact that they're young and aspirational, this is from classy.org, who's done an extensive look back at their Giving Tuesday donors over the last number of years. And they found that Giving Tuesday donors are also stickier donors, particularly if they're stewarded properly. Again, so if they're thanked and celebrated. We find that Giving Tuesday donors are more likely to stay with the organization and give again in a year, that they are more likely to give again at year end, so not even a month later. And they're also more likely to launch peer fundraising campaigns. Again, all of this dependent on whether they're stewarded effectively. But Giving Tuesday donors have shown, again, not just on Classy and Network for Good, but on many of our other platforms, these characteristics. And that's because we've become the gateway to giving for young people around the world. And I think that the nature of Giving Tuesday as a joyous celebration of generosity is really different from the way that so much of giving and fundraising happens around the country, where there's this idea of sort of obligation rather than opportunity. So let's fast forward and talk about two other really important topics, and then we'll dig into 6 or 7 steps that you can take to get ready for your Giving Tuesday campaign. So I always get this question, so I've added this slide into my presentation about donor fatigue, that, oh, people are getting so many emails on Giving Tuesday. And so first of all, donor fatigue is a myth. What donor fatigue really reflects is poor marketing by nonprofits. Just think about your consumer marketing experience. Think about the email lists that you're on, whether it's Gap or Wayfair, Amazon, or other things. Think about how many emails you're getting a day, not just how many emails you might be getting in a month. Well, nonprofits need to adopt the mindset that it's not about how often they reach out to donors. It's about the nature of their asking. If they look like, this sweet kitty here, like, big-eyed begging for donations, that turns people off. People are fatigued by that kind of asking. But if you tell an inspiring story that makes people feel like they matter and like they can make a difference, you're going to keep them inspired and giving and believing in your organization. Hopefully this will advance here. Arielle, might need you. There we go. Okay, so let's talk about. Here we go. All right, now we got it moving. Let's talk about the 7 steps that we've seen work all around the world in Giving Tuesday campaigns. It's definitely not too late to get started. I would certainly recommend next year, give yourselves a little more time if in fact you are just getting started, because the more time you have, the more you can get done. But let's jump into to some specifics. So there's a few global things that work everywhere, by whether you're talking about communities or individual nonprofits, whether you're talking about the US or around the world, for critical things. The first is an inspired leader. Probably most of you on the phone are the leader of your Giving Tuesday campaign. But if you're listening and someone else on your team is the person who is really going to be the day in and day out leader, or you're thinking about who on your team might be appropriate, Giving Tuesday is an incredible opportunity to give somebody who's young and passionate and socially agile a chance to really jump in and make a difference for your organization. And so if that's you, fantastic. If it's not, what a chance to give somebody, an opportunity to really show what they can do on behalf of you. The second is a clear big goal. I'm going to go counterclockwise here. So goals really set the framework for your campaign, and we're going to talk more about goals in a minute. But you want your goal to be, what I always like to say is a goal should be ambitious enough that you feel butterflies in your stomach when you think about it. It shouldn't be so ambitious that you feel like you're going to throw up at the thought of it, but you want some butterflies. You don't want it to seem so reachable that if you accomplish it, it's going to seem like just another day at the office and everybody's going to be like, okay, well, so what? So think about what is a clear, big goal for your campaign. The next is collaboration. One of the ways that you really amplify your messaging on Giving Tuesday is by thinking about how to create win-win collaborations for Giving Tuesday. And these might be community partners like, restaurants and retailers. They might be people with big voices in your community who can be social media ambassadors for you. It could be co-hosting an event. It might even be being a bunch of organizations who are all thematically aligned. For example, the arts organizations in your community coming together and recognizing that all of your voices are louder when you join together. And then finally, it's authenticity. So, we all know, I said a moment ago, there's no such thing as donor fatigue, that it's about bad messaging. what we all have become so social media savvy that when we see something on social media, our authenticity radar is turned on and tuned in with a very high level of calibration. So we want to see things that are authentic, that make us feel like we understand what the cause is about, that there's a real person or group of people that are going to be impacted, or dogs or whatever it is, but it's real, and that you're willing to not take yourself too seriously. So I love this photo because this is an example of a guy who set a goal for his organization that if they reach their Giving Tuesday goal, he would dress up in a tutu and a tiara and a scepter and do a ballet class with 4-year-olds. And as you can tell, they reached the goal and he did it. And that very kind of fun, kitschy campaign really works on Giving Tuesday in terms of breaking through. And when you think about getting a late start, it's one of the things that you can put together on short notice. So let's dig into these 7 steps. So the first is setting your goal. So a goal is a little bit like a party theme. And I don't mean, and when I say that, I'm not taking this lightly. I think the goal is sort of the scaffolding for your campaign. Because like a party theme, if you set a goal, it is telling you not only what you will do for your Giving Tuesday campaign, but what you're not going to do. And so if you think about, deciding that you're going to have a party that's Mexican themed, then you're not going to waste time when you walk into Party City going up and down, the St. Patrick's Day aisle, right? So it creates not only direction, but it creates efficiency because you really can fine tune how you're going to spend your time. And in Giving Tuesday, there's no Giving Tuesday police. And as I said, we're about Giving Tuesday, not Fundraising Tuesday. So your goal can be a whole lot of different things. Your goal can certainly be about dollars, and that's, of course, what many of you are focused on. But equally important as opportunities is to think about whether or not maybe the number of donors should be a goal, or the number of new donors, young donors, monthly givers, social followers, volunteers, event participants, or even donated goods. And what you might ultimately decide, you saw that I skipped that give back, is that for your organization, the most important thing that you could do on Giving Tuesday is to do something like a thankathon, where you bring everybody together in a room and you say, look, we're not going to ask for money today. We're going to thank all the people that have supported us all year. And that your goal for that thankathon might be to thank 1,000 people who supported you in some way. But this process of setting your goal really gives you that framework for the entire campaign. The second is effective storytelling. Again, going back to that, how do we counteract this perception of donor fatigue? So storytelling is so critical, and there's tons and tons and tons of great resources out there on storytelling. I'm going to just share 2 perspectives that I think are really important. The first is to land the helicopter. And what I mean by that is I want you to kind of go with me on this journey to a disaster zone. So you're in a helicopter and you're flying over this disaster zone, looking out over this sort of water as far as the eye can see. And somebody says to you, okay, please help. And you say, well, my God, you might as well keep flying, because what can I possibly do to make a difference? But as the helicopter starts to descend and you pass through 5,000 feet, now you're starting to see patches of land and buildings and some clear areas. And then you descend to 2,500 feet, and now you're starting to see figures of people, and you descend through 1,000 feet, and now you see families, with their dog dragging behind, or carrying a backpack, or holding a child's hand. And then you land, and you see the people in front of you, and one at a time, you know exactly what to do. Well, too often in the social sector, nonprofits and similar organizations talk from the helicopter. They want to tell you at scale the magnitude of a problem. So you can imagine, if you're a literacy organization, that you tell the story, that 13,000 people in Baltimore need literacy services. Well, all that is true, and that's devastating. But if you tell me instead that John is reading Goodnight Moon to his daughter for the third time tonight because he went through our program, that is telling me a very different story about how you make an impact on people's lives and why my gift matters than if you tell me that 13,000 people need literacy services. You can certainly back up the story of John by saying, and John is only one of 13,000 people in our city who need our services. That's great. But you've got to get me connected with John for me to want to act on behalf of your organization. And so, so I like to recommend that people really zero in on a specific theme, a program, project, or type of giving, and a single iconic story, particularly when you're talking about only having 3 weeks left to go. I want you to think a little bit about pumpkin spice lattes and McRib sandwiches. If you think about the way that, again, consumer marketers use that kind of surround sound marketing, when the pumpkin spice latte comes live in October for Starbucks, they're not doing that because they hope that you're not going to come in and buy your caramel macchiato. They're doing that because they know that for you to be thinking about Starbucks in a busy month of the year, they have to surround you with a message that will break through. So they use that pumpkin spice latte, or the way that McDonald uses the McRib sandwich, as a way to keep themselves top of mind so that you'll go into Starbucks and get your favorite. And so an iconic, as nonprofits, we want to tell hundreds of stories of all the good work we do. But the truth is, it's going to take 27 touches for that story to even start to resonate with somebody. That's where we've gotten to with the sort of the proliferation of social media. So you need a single story that you're telling over and over and over again. And just when you are bored to tears of that story, the people on the other end are just hearing it. So I want to show an example here of Project Renewal in New York, who told the story of Harry Dickerson. Harry was a client of theirs who was experiencing homelessness, and because he was able to get safe shelter for an extended period of time, he not only turned his life around and got a great job and got his family stable, but he really became just an incredible advocate for the work of Project Renewal. And so they built their entire campaign around the story of Harry. And Harry was in all their marketing, he was the focal point of the story. And then when you got to their online giving page, Harry was still front and center, right? The other good things in this campaign, look how clear it is what they're raising funds for. 1,475 nights of safe shelter for men and women this holiday season. It's a very clear goal. We talked about goals a minute ago. It's an incredibly clear and specific goal. So I know exactly how my donation will make a difference. They carried the story all the way through from their email outreach, their social channels, into the online giving page. And then, we talked about supporting that story with data, and they sort of took the story of Harry and they said, in essence, Harry was one of 50,000 New Yorkers who need our services. So this is just a fantastic example of how to pull those first 2 points together of having your iconic story and your goal really go hand in hand. So this is continuing on with Harry. These are some of the visuals that they used for the campaign through Project Renewal. So think about how you gather your assets, visuals, video if you have it. At this stage of the game, you may or may not want to use a different Giving Tuesday campaign logo. You might remember in that Be More Gives More campaign, we created a logo that we thought would really resonate in Baltimore. We also, and you can do that in Canva. You can take the Giving Tuesday logo and make it your own, or you can just use the Giving Tuesday logo as it is. Think about series of images tied to your iconic story. In a perfect world, even if you just create it on an iPhone, have the subject of your iconic story talk about their experiences with your organization. If you're an organization that doesn't have people at the center of your mission, or if you're an organization for whom your clients' situations are very sensitive, you can tell the story through the eyes of a staff person So don't let that hold you back from making it very personal. Or you can, you can create, and you can say it up front that you're, for purposes of anonymity, that you're using a fake name. So there are different ways that you can approach it if you have a very sensitive client base. But it's really, really critical that you tie your assets to the story that you're telling. And then finally, one way, if you do want to sort of do more than just tell that story over and over and over again, one of the fun things that you can do is you can layer into that story sort of a day in the life kind of images from your organization. So you can show somebody at work doing something important. You can show funny things that happen. You can show moving things that happen within your organization. And that can be one of the ways that you kind of break up the iconic story, but don't back away from that iconic story, because it's going to be critical in terms of breaking through. Next, you want to have a single crystal clear call to action. It's really easy to sort of want to hit people up in different ways, but again, you've got 3 weeks to go. You saw it in the project renewal landing page, that sort of 1,475 nights of shelter. Just think about that number, even 1,475. It's so specific, and it is saying something that says, like, we've thought about this campaign and what we really need, and this is a specific goal. So it sometimes can be hard to think about how you create an inspiring ask, and so we have friends at Giving Tuesday at a group that is called Achieve, and Achieve for a long time published a body of research called the Millennial Impact Project, and they found that there was a structure for outreach that really moved the needle on asking, and it was to take this concept of a belief statement, a you statement, and an opportunity statement. So we'll use an example that is one that I actually worked on. So there was a community college in Baltimore that was faced with a really challenging dilemma of students being forced to have to make a choice some days between eating or taking the bus and going to school. And so they decided to create a food pantry for students where they were going to stock the pantry, and they were working on this campaign for a while when they decided that it wasn't working. And I was working with them on some Giving Tuesday stuff, and we said, look, let's reframe this campaign. So we took exactly the steps that we've talked about up to here, where we set a goal, we found an inspiring student who was willing to be the focal point of the story, and that student became the sort of subject of our outreach. But then we created this structure, this belief statement, you statement, and opportunity statement. So imagine that this is the sort of the ask that you're getting. So we've told the story, his name was Juan, and we've told the story of Juan. And then we say, we believe that no student should have to choose between food and learning. Now, why is that belief statement important? Because what happens when you hear that statement? Your instinct, when somebody says, we believe that no student should have to choose between food and learning, is that you say, I believe that too. So now I'm one of the we. So we're in a community together. So that we statement is inviting you to raise your hand to be part of my community. Now, once they've done that, so now you're in the community. Now they offer a you statement. You can help us stock the pantry so that no CCBC student has to make that choice. And you could even say no CCBC student like Juan ever again has to make that choice. And then there's an opportunity statement. And the opportunity statement is an invitation to be part of the change. And are you with us is one way you can say it a bunch of different ways, but it's an invitation. Again, it's this idea of opportunity, not obligation. So it's an invitation to join in the change. So think about this structure as you're thinking about your campaign as a really simple framework for how to make an inspiring ask. The next thing that I can't emphasize enough it is so vitally, vitally important. And this you could do today. You know, I always like to leave people with one bit of homework that you can do the minute that you hang up from this call. So you can hang up from this call and you can do this right now. You can actually go through your donor's experience. So make sure it's okay with your boss, or just spend, you know, a few dollars of your own and go through on every single platform, your computer, your phone, a tablet, Android and iOS operating systems, and go through your donor's experience, ideally all the way from an outreach email through to a thank you, and see what that experience is like right now. Because now is the time when you still have a chance to make that experience smoother, frictionless, more delightful. You want to identify any pain points. I mean, sometimes you'll just be shocked that, like, you're putting your donors through drop-down boxes, or, you know, other things that just, you know, they frustrate you, so they're sure to frustrate your donors, who are not nearly as connected and motivated to support you as you will be. So this is today's homework. You know, $5, a bunch of different gifts through different platforms. Make sure you go through your donor's experience. Next is to think about, you know, how are you going to kick off your campaign? And if you have time to put together some kind of a fun, whether it's a digital or an in-person kickoff, that's awesome. Your kickoff might actually just be the kickoffs that you do through your email outreach right ahead of Giving Tuesday. But think intentionally about kicking off. Make it a thing, right? Don't just start sort of like sending ask emails. Start with, you know, kind of an invitation to the fun by kicking off your campaign. Then once you have kicked off, you want to send at least 3 to 4 emails in the days leading up to Giving Tuesday. And on Giving Tuesday, it's perfectly reasonable to think about 2, 3, or 4 emails that you might send that day, that particularly if you have set a goal and you can kind of be benchmarking your progress against the goal. Of course, you want to be sharing that out through your social channels as well. But what your day of emails are actually doing is encouraging the people who have donated to share, and the people who have donated to sort of get excited by the swell of support that you're receiving. And then finally, plan Giving Tuesday itself. We hear from organizations around the country and around the world that Giving Tuesday is, bar none, the most fun day of the year that they have as an organization when it's planned well. Think about, you know, having a room where you're going to have your team come together and all sit in a room, and they can be texting their friends, you know, talking about how excited they are about whatever you're raising funds for. You can be sharing pictures of your team on social media. You can be doing this thankathon at the same time that you're potentially reaching out to new supporters. Like, you can really make it a fun day, and you want to have snacks and balloons and, you know, either a digital or a paper thermometer up on the wall. I mean, make it a fun day, because it conveys that sense that it's joyous to give together, and that the purpose of giving is to make a difference in people's lives. You know, I do a lot of these workshops, and I always say to people that people want a drill. They want a hole, not a drill, right? Just think about that. So nobody buys a drill because they want a drill. They buy a drill because they want a hole. And so the whole idea of giving is that people want to matter in people's lives. They don't want to give. They give because they want to matter. And so what you should be emphasizing is the joy of making a difference. And that kind of spirit on Giving Tuesday really is a key to a successful campaign. Because when it comes right down to it, we're all working for a stronger, safer, smarter, healthier world. And you guys are on the front lines every day making that happen. So that's my observations from looking at thousands of campaigns across the country and across the world. But I'm really excited to introduce you to Daniel Morgan, who has led firsthand a last-minute Giving Tuesday campaign and is going to share what works so well for him. Daniel, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jamie. That was wonderful, and thanks to everyone that's on here, to GuideStar Network for Good. Honored to be here and speaking with fellow members of the nonprofit community. So I'm with an organization by the name of Project Healing Waters Fly Fishing. We are primarily a volunteer-based organization. We have over 200 volunteer-run programs across the country of about 3,500 volunteers who work with injured and disabled veterans. And we served over 8,400 disabled veterans last year alone. We're going to be entering into, I believe, our 4th Giving Tuesday season. We're really excited about it. Our first crack at it was very much a last minute thrown together thing, but we really looked at some key areas that I'm excited to share with you. So predominantly, Jamie shared a lot of really wonderful tips for you all. I'm really going to focus a little bit predominantly sort of on the organic, and we'll touch upon sort of some paid strategies that worked for us. So as Jamie mentioned, it's really important up front to really set your goals and objectives, not only to share sort of with your constituents and potential donors so that you can all celebrate together, but also as you enter into future campaigns, whether that's Giving Tuesday or even an annual appeal, you'll really be able to understand what worked and what didn't. And that'll sort of help you influence your planning moving forward. So really to understand what are those goals and objectives up front, and how are you going to measure success? So much of this, I'm really just emphasizing sort of what Jamie said, but it's really important that you design your message to share those stories in this age of social media, to provide shareable content, to frame that message to be bigger than words, compelling images, or video, and then most importantly, to activate your community. It takes a team for a successful Giving Tuesday campaign. One of my favorite sort of quotes is there at the bottom, that in this age of social media, you can't control your message or you can't control your brand, but it's really important for you to nurture and steer it. And this is where your community can really come into play and can really be a collective effort on a day like Giving Tuesday. It really does take a team. So activating your community and empowering your champions. Jamie really spoke a bit about the authenticity radar. So to take that idea in this age of social media, I like to extend that out to the notion of peer recommendations, peer-to-peer. And this is where your team can come in play. People are most apt to take action when it comes from something or someone that they value and trust. And social media presents you with a unique opportunity to do that. The greatest champions of your cause and of your mission are often your leadership, your staff, volunteers, and those who may have benefited from your cause. So here at Project Healing Waters, with over 3,000 volunteers, each of those people has had their own unique, inspiring and personal experience with the organization and with the veterans that we serve. So we want to enable them around sort of a core message, a message that we've designed. We don't want them necessarily copying and pasting that exact message. We want to empower them and nurture and steer them as they share that message on Giving Tuesday. So you can do that by really creating, effectively a media pack that you can provide in advance of Giving Tuesday through email to your constituents, whether that's volunteers, maybe high-profile champions and staff, a little bit about what you're seeking to accomplish, what's your goal, what's the message, what are some sample messages that they might want to use. You want them to make it their own. Their story and their voice, particularly on social media, is going to be much more powerful than sort of a corporate voice or a voice coming from the organization itself. If my mother, for example, were to make a post urging me to volunteer with a particular organization, I'm much more apt to take action on that when it's coming from her versus the organization itself. So we really looked to leverage this on Giving Tuesday by empowering our community, by activating our community, by providing them with the resources and the tools that they need for Giving Tuesday. So some of those things are listed here on the slide. That could be things like frequently asked questions. What is Giving Tuesday? How can I get involved? How does this benefit Project Healing Waters Fly Fishing? Suggested language. Like I said, what's the message? What are those stories going to be? And provide some samples for them. You can provide a style guide. You noticed on the earlier slide, we really used what we believe to be a very powerful image of a volunteer helping a veteran, overlaid with a Giving Tuesday logo. Style guide is helpful. Content and schedule. When is the organization going to be posting? Can they share it and personalize it and make it their own? To, again, really take advantage of peer recommendations and the ability to inspire people, and then in turn their friends, colleagues, or even fellow volunteers to take action on Giving Tuesday. So providing that schedule and that content is important. Again, always anchored in the understanding it's very difficult to control that message or that particular brand, but you can nurture it and steer it. And that comes through providing your volunteers, your constituents, and your staff with the information that they need. And then finally, something important that Jamie touched upon was the need for the retention plan. We very much look towards stewardship, look towards retention. We're constantly seeking. For our organization, there are over 3 million disabled veterans in the United States, and we only serve just shy of 10,000 of those. So our work continues. It's important for us to nurture, and as she said, reach out to those $36 donors. How are we going to engage them? How are we going to thank them? And to show that, their contribution and really joining our cause is making a difference, and that they are now part of the family. So sharing that retention plan, behind the scenes with your volunteers, your staff, and your constituents will do great good. And this is really an unpaid strategy. This is a way to activate the greatest champions and spokespeople that you have. And those are the folks who are involved with your organization or cause already. It's just equipping them with the tools and resources that they need to really create an army on Giving Tuesday. Now, coupling that organic strategy, you can look to a paid strategy as well. Now, that said, it's a very crowded field when it comes to bidding on AdWords or bidding for Facebook ads when it comes to Giving Tuesday, and especially so with an election happening right now. Lots of ads are being done. So it's important that when you enter into this, we look back to what are those goals and objectives. How are you going to implement those paid strategies? Will they take place before Giving Tuesday, on Giving Tuesday, or after Giving Tuesday? And what are the particular strengths of each platform? That could be email, that could be a landing page. How are you going to measure it? How are you going to track it? Or various social media platforms. What might work for one volunteer might not work for another. So it's important to really look at each platform that you're using. It's also important to leverage opportunities. Numerous organizations have matching opportunities. Some places may have less advertising traffic on a given day that you might be able to take advantage of. It's also important that you look at, what are the target audiences? Most of us have email lists. We have house lists. Some of us have segmented those using some of the great Network for Good tools. So really, who do you want to reach with sort of your paid efforts? And then again, set your schedule, set your budgets for each one of those, and then the ever important retention plan. Just because Giving Tuesday may have ended, your work really has begun. You have cultivated a whole new group of constituents that you've brought to your cause through Giving Tuesday. So how are you going to retain them? That could be in the form of advertising. It needs to go well beyond just a simple IRS thank you. That can be showing storytelling, impact, or plans for the upcoming year. So a paid strategy could continue long after Giving Tuesday is done to foster that necessary stewardship moving forward and to set you up for success, whether it's in your end of year giving or moving into 2019. And then executing, you've laid out your plan. So it's just important to follow your schedule, monitor trends, and join those conversations. If you've activated this army of constituents and champions and supporters, it's important on social media in this real-time age to get in there and say thank you, to share, to join those conversations. Social is a two-way street, so it's important to be a part of that. That plays to highlighting your champions. When powerful stories are shaped and crafted within the framework of your Giving Tuesday campaign by your volunteers, it's important that you highlight them. Share those stories. That will speak to retention of the people you already have and really encourage them to continue sharing that message and to really preach your cause to their friends, colleagues, and constituents. Initially, we talked about those key performance measures. Giving Tuesday is condensed into a 24-hour give period. So it's important that you keep an eye on things that you're looking to monitor to gauge success. That could be ultimately that it could be volunteer signups, that could be dollars in the bank, it could be website conversions, but to track those in real time and see if you need to make a pivot. Last year with Giving Tuesday, we pivoted mid-afternoon because some of our KPMs were not what we were looking to do. So we resorted to a much more social media heavy strategy last year. And that came about, it created great success for us, but it happened as a result of that real-time tracking. And that goes directly into have some flexibility on this day. You will have hopefully many of your constituents, your volunteers and those champions out there singing your praises and activating their communities. So to have some flexibility and then the ever important retention efforts. What impact did Giving Tuesday have on your cause? Where do you go from here? How can people really get more involved, whether it's through spreading the word, volunteering, or giving? How can they become a greater part of your organizational family? And to thank them and to recognize them is very, very important. And that is it for me. Again, it's been a total pleasure chatting with all of you. And I will now turn it back over to Arielle.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Daniel. You shared a ton of great insight, and I'm excited to open the floor to everybody so we can get to all of your burning questions. We may not get to every single one that was submitted, but we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. So I'll kick it off, Jamie, sending this question to you. When you talked about goals, the question came through was, how clear-cut should the goals be? Should they be really general? Should they be very specific? Or should it be different between kind of internal goals versus external goals?
My recommendation is that your goal should be very clear and specific to everybody, internally and externally. Now, you may have layers of goals. So you may have a goal that is about what you want from your community of supporters, and you may have a different set of, so for example, your goal externally might be that you want to have 100 donors on Giving Tuesday, but you may know internally that you hope that half of those 100 donors are new donors. So it's not that every goal that you have has to be public, but your key goal should certainly be something that is part of inspiring your community so that they understand how they matter in your campaign and what it is that they're contributing to. Beyond the human, like there's sort of this idea of like, what are we collectively helping you accomplish with your goal?
Perfect. One question, Daniel, I wonder if you can help kind of answer this question is, Melanie was asking about how, you track your donations. Is there a platform that you use? Is there a recommendation that you would make for an organization that's looking to kind of track and monitor organizations or donations that they're receiving throughout Giving Tuesday?
Sure. We try and steer everything really into one bucket. So we're using Network for Good. We'll use a fundraising page on Network for Good. There's a variety, and Jamie touched upon this, that are mobile friendly, but also work really across all different operating systems. But we try to drive all traffic to a single bucket so that we can monitor that. We can really have we can measure and let people know how close we are to that goal that we've previously set. And that's really the point that we drive. If you think about a bike tire has a hub and it has many spokes. So those spokes, we like to have those spokes all lead to center, all to the hub. So that could be social, that could be your champions, web, email, but really having all points lead to center. And that particular link that we use on Network for Good, that's provided to our champions, our volunteers, and we really share that around across all of our channels. But again, to have all points lead to center for Giving Tuesday is important. Not only does that help really on the accounting side, but it also really lets the community see and celebrate the success that you're having by having really everything go to a single destination.
And Arielle, if I can add into that, because I see it just in the question list that there's a number of questions about platforms and about Facebook in particular. So I want to clear up one bit of confusion. So there is no central Giving Tuesday platform. So all the online giving platforms around the country are our partners. Network for Good is a great platform. There's a lot of others as well. And they all, what I would recommend to most nonprofits is you're 3 weeks out, whatever you have now, if you're using Network for Good, that's your platform. If you're using PayPal, that's your platform. If you're using something else, that's your platform. I think that this is not necessarily the time to change as much as it is the time to just go through that donor's experience and make sure that your whole experience is fine-tuned as much as possible. In terms of Facebook directly, because I think there's a lot of excitement about Facebook because they announced with PayPal this, $7 million match. I just want to clarify that our experience last year with the $2 million match that Facebook had, and Facebook, it's its own campaign. It's not part of, Giving Tuesday doesn't run this campaign. They're a partner just like Network for Good and Blackbaud and everybody else are partners. Their $2 million of matching funds, it launched at 8 a.m. It was completely used up by 8:02 a.m. And even this $7 million this year will probably be used up in the first half hour of the day. And so I wouldn't, and very few nonprofits got anything meaningful from Facebook on Giving Tuesday. And while it's terrific that they're doing that and that they're increasingly thinking about how they serve nonprofits, for your purposes, it's very easy for people to opt out of sharing their information. So one of the frustrations that we heard from a lot of nonprofits was that they didn't get donor information. And I think Daniel will, reiterate the point that the dollars in many ways matter less than the donor information, because that gift is the beginning of your relationship with that donor. And if you don't have the information to follow up and continue to celebrate and cultivate them, then whatever amount you got on Giving Tuesday isn't worth that much. So I just would encourage people to, think about about the Facebook thing as potentially a nice add-on, but not as the central hub of your campaign, because, of all those reasons that I just said.
I totally agree, Jamie. And I think it behooves us to differentiate between the donate button on pages versus Facebook fundraisers. So the donate button, you can link to, say, a Network for Good or another processing service where you will get that donor information and you can foster stewardship and your retention efforts by getting that donor data, whereas the fundraisers, you don't. So I think it's important for anyone on the phone to really understand that differentiation as you look towards your retention efforts and as you look towards donor stewardship.
Yeah, really good point.
Absolutely. Thank you both for kind of helping dive into that deeply. Unfortunately, we are at the end of the hour, so I do just want to say, number one, thank you to all of you for joining us today. Thank you to Jamie and Daniel for offering such great insight, and a huge thank you to Network for Good for making this presentation possible. Don't forget, we will be sending the recording and the presentation slides to you via email in the next day or so. So we appreciate your time today, and we wish you the best of luck with Giving Tuesday. And with that, we'll sign off. Thank you all so much.